anyone who has ever had to get a plumber in to fix something will recognise Chancellor Rachel Reeves' tone this afternoon. Who put this in? She will say. She kicks the financial pipes. Then she'll shake her head and tell us, you got ripped off by cowboys. But she might leave the inevitable bill till her October budget, when she will suck her teeth and say, it's going to cost you. But do we believe her? Is there really a black hole, or is it a black political lie? So, Dominic, is it kind of pointless going through the motions here and saying, hang on a second, many people said that this would happen and it now has. In fact, previous chancellors have done exactly the same thing. Is it pointless saying, well, we knew this was going to happen and it has now?
Well, it's a purely political exercise. It's not an economic or financial exercise. The first thing that Labour are thinking about once they won the election, at the forefront of their minds, is our main priority is to win the next election. That's how they operate. And so it's designed to do that. They want a repeat of the unfortunate incident when Liam Byrne, who was the last Labour chief secretary, left behind a note for his successor saying, I'm afraid there's no money left. And this, the Conservatives used ruthlessly and effectively. And Labour are seething about that, and they want their own version. But of course, as many independent observers, including Paul Johnson, the head of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, have said, this is completely absurd. Everything was transparent through the Office of Budget Responsibility. By the way, Rachel Reeves said that to the Financial Times 2 weeks before we went to the voting boxes, that was the case. The biggest single element in what she calls a black hole is that the pay review bodies, which was not known beforehand, are recommending a 5.5% increase, basically for the entire public sector, which will cost about 10 billion. But I don't think you can blame the outgoing government for that exactly. The independent pay review body is independent, and it's entirely Rachel Reeves' decision as Chancellor whether she wants to meet that in full or not, and address the budget accordingly.
When Labour say, we've quite literally opened the books. We've gone through each department line by line. And actually, what they've said over the weekend? They've said that actually the Conservatives covered it up. I don't exactly know how they covered it up. I suppose they just didn't talk about it. That's how they, inverted commas, covered it up. But we've gone through stuff line by line. And for example, Rwanda was 300 million extra than the Conservatives said that it was, or that it would be. Is that credible?
Well, no, because the way that I think it was Yvette Cooper, now the Home Secretary, got to the figure of, I think, 800 million was by including the pay and the cost of the 1,000 or so civil servants working on it. But those civil servants would be employed by us anyway. So that is just false accounting.
What does all of this mean, though? Because I think actually, if you look at the public polling on this, Dominic, it's quite interesting because people will say that they agree. So something like 45% of people agree that the country's finances are in a bad way. So there may be some wriggle room for Labour there. But what they also say, only 15% of people polled said they wanted taxes to go up, which is perhaps it's not surprising. What then is the way out of this? There's different ways. You spend less, you borrow more, you cut, all these infrastructure projects, etc. go in the bin. What do you think the options are available to the Chancellor? Which one is she most likely to take?
Well, I mean, obviously the concern, you're right. She's announced cutting lots of infrastructure projects, which is quite interesting given that they were going to be Bob the Builder. And now they're Bob the Down Tools. But clearly tax is going to be the issue. One of the interesting things is that Labour backed Jeremy Hunt's decision as Chancellor to have two very significant cuts in national insurance tax. And of course, that's money which could otherwise be spent on the public services. And what interests me is that Labour did not vote against it. And it was already clear what the situation was. So they were, if you like, complicit in the thing that they are now denouncing as spending money that you don't have. And now the public, you're right, don't want to hear from the Conservatives. So no one's going to say, oh, we regret deeply now not voting Conservative. And So whatever they say will not be listened to. But the responsibility is now fully and 100% on Labour. That's what they want. That's what they deserve because they won the election convincingly. And the mistakes are all there waiting to be made.
What then does it mean in terms of taxes, do you think? I mean, there's many theories floating around about which taxes might have to rise potentially in the budget. We've gone through these arguments throughout the election campaign, and Labour were at pains to list the taxes that they would not raise, and then they talked about there being nothing in their manifesto which would require any other taxes to rise, which is an interesting form of words. So what do you think that actually means now that we know that Rachel Reeves is going to stand up at 3:30 and say, you know what, it's much worse than I thought?
Well, I mean, I think from what I understand, the question of taxes would arise at the time of the autumn statement, as usual. She's not going to do what George Osborne had to do in 2010 after the credit crunch was an emergency budget. So we've got a bit of time. I mean, obviously, the one that most people are thinking about is capital gains tax, because she has ruled out all the high revenue raisers, such as NI, income tax, VAT. The problem with dealing with sharp rising capital gains tax is that Labour very much want to encourage, or they say they want to encourage, entrepreneurialism, business, financial investment. And if you had a very sharp increase in capital gains tax, it would discourage exactly those people. So that's a problem that they have to address. But it's a problem, as I say, in a sense of their own making, because they deliberately cut off or pledge not to increase all, which is overwhelmingly the biggest raisers of tax revenue.
It's interesting. We will see what happens.
Hello, welcome to the Treasury.
Last week, the British people voted for change. And over the last 72 hours, I have begun the work necessary to deliver on that mandate. Our manifesto was clear. Sustained economic growth is the only route to the improved prosperity that our country needs and to improve the living standards of working people.
It is now our national mission. There is no time to waste. This morning, I want to outline the first steps that this new Labour government has taken to fix the foundation.
Where previous governments have been unwilling to take the difficult decisions to deliver growth or have waited too long to act, I will not hesitate. Growth was the Labour Party's mission in opposition. It is now our national mission. There is no time to waste.
That whoever won the general election would inherit the worst set of circumstances since the Second World War. To Parliament before the summer recess. This will be separate from a budget that will be held later.
I instructed Treasury officials to provide an assessment of the state of our spending inheritance so that I can understand the full scale of the challenge, and I will present this to Parliament before the summer recess. This will be separate from a budget that will be held later this year, and I will confirm the date of that budget alongside a forecast from the Office for Budget Responsibility in due course.